Emily Davis reporting there. Well, Labour's Stephen Kinnock is a member of the Commons Brexit Committee and joins me now. Thanks very much for coming in this morning. First of all, I'm looking at this, what Kevin's report was talking about there, this idea of a power grab as the powers return from Brussels to Westminster. What do you make of that?
I think that's absolutely right. This bill is clearly not fit for purpose. It's not fit for purpose because it disrespects the principles of devolution. It is trying to introduce these Henry VIII powers, which will be using behind-the-scenes statutory instruments on massively important pieces of legislation, so not enough scrutiny, and on the Charter of Human Rights. It's also taking away rights which will lead to, I think, what a lot of Conservative MPs want to see, a bonfire of rights in terms of employment law and all the other things we've come to expect and enjoy.
But from a devolution constitutional point of view, Theresa May has said on several occasions, Alan Cairns, the Secretary of State for Wales, has said on several occasions they expect the Assembly, the Welsh Assembly, to gain extra powers as part of this process. So why do you think that could be seen as a power grab?
Well, if that's what they expect, then let's have it on the face of the bill. This bill could have been an opportunity to really clarify and codify the relationship between Westminster and the devolved administrations, and in a way which really respects the spirit and the letter of devolution. Instead, they're asking us to take it all on trust.
Yeah, so is it just a lack of trust? Because you don't take them at their word when Theresa May says at the dispatch box in the House of Commons, you'll get more powers. That's a matter of time. They ran out of time, so they couldn't have it debated in the House of Commons. You don't trust them?
Well, has the government done anything in this whole process to inspire trust? They constantly tried to prevent Parliament from having a role, even on triggering Article 50. There had to be a legal case to force them, drag them kicking and screaming to Parliament on that. They've tried all sorts of tricks to take Parliament out of this process and give power to the executive. And so why should we trust them on this? I mean, the spirit of the referendum was, OK, take back control. I'm not sure people thought of that meaning, taking control from Brussels and giving it to Whitehall. It's got to be about giving control back to the devolved administrations. And that's what I think a lot of people voted for on the 23rd of June 2016.
And then I guess so there is still this issue of an ambiguity about what people were voting for, which maybe presents itself in government policy. They're not here to defend themselves, but certainly seems to be manifesting itself in Labour policy, because there doesn't seem to be much clarity about what Labour wants in terms of, for example, do you, as a Labour MP, think Labour's policy is to stay in the customs union or not, stay in the single market or not? There isn't much clarity, is there?
I mean, just firstly on the withdrawal bill, our position on this has been very clear, and I think the behaviour of the government could potentially provoke a constitutional crisis.
But more broadly.
So let's just be clear on that. On the single market and the customs union, I think it is time for us to really clarify our position. I think that position needs to be a commitment to the United Kingdom going into the European Economic Area and the European Free Trade Association. So if you like, the Norway model. And I know people have said, well, you can't be in the single market. Norway is not actually in the single market. It's in the European Economic Area. There are significant differences between the EEA and the single market, and particularly around controlling the free movement of labour. Articles 112 and 113 of the EEA agreement allow the pulling of an emergency brake and a settlement for a long-term new arrangement on free movement of labour. So there are significant differences.
But that will also include then on the Norway model, as it's called, paying in for that access to the European Union's single market. So you're expecting a hefty bill for years and years to come for that membership of the European Union.
A very important
version of it.
A very important distinction also on this is.
But you'd be happy with that, with paying in?
If I could just say that what Norway does is negotiate very clearly ring-fenced budgets for different pieces of the deal that it does. So it's a point of negotiation as to how much we would continue to pay in. But it's not a budgetary contribution which just goes into the central coffers and is distributed by the EU. It's ring-fenced so that the money that goes from Norway to Brussels is actually specifically negotiated for specific value that they get back from the European Economic Area.
Sure, and that's your view, and you say you want clarity on that. The problem is, and you'll know this, Jeremy Corbyn, Labour leader, has ruled that out, saying that you can't remain as part of the single market, as part of the customs union, because he says that's what Brexit meant. You won't get it past the leadership, will you?
I think the key point now for people to understand is that the European Economic Area and the Norway model is not the same as the single market. And if we can actually get that point
Does Jeremy Corbyn know that?
Very interesting. I saw an interview with Jeremy in The Guardian recently where he actually did draw the distinction between Norway and the single market. He, for example, pointed out that Norway is not part of the common fisheries policy, not part of the common agricultural policy, has a different arrangement if it wants to. It's chosen not to. The Norwegians have chosen not to. On free movement of labour, but the opportunity exists to do all of those things. So I think, and there's no European Court of Justice jurisdiction. The EFTA Arbitration Court is a different court which actually diverges quite substantially from the ECJ.
Because obviously, you'll know, in Wales, we're quite well versed on the Norway model, because this is what Carwyn Jones has been talking about for a number of months, almost from the beginnings after the referendum. But the problem is, Jeremy Corbyn won't listen to that. You know, Carwyn Jones is saying on immigration, you can come to the UK, come to Wales, if you're coming to a job. The problem is, he's been trying to sell that to Labour leadership and isn't getting anywhere. What makes you think that it'll change now?
I think there's been a lack of clarity and understanding around the European Economic Area and the opportunities that it offers to be part of a model, the European Economic Area model, but with opportunities to do some bespoke negotiations within that. And I think what we need to do is stop referring to Norway as a single market option. You cannot be a full member of the single market unless you're a full member of the European Union, but you can be in the European Economic Area. That gives you a kind of associate status, and I think that's by far the best way of getting a Brexit which doesn't wreck the British economy and reunites our deeply divided country.
You seem to be outlining this as a problem of not understanding, whereas I'd suggest to you maybe the leadership of the Labour Party understands it but disagrees. And what's going to have to happen now is you're going to have some sort of showdown with the Labour group of members of Parliament, some of whom will agree with you and some will agree with with Jeremy Corbyn, and that's going to be an almighty row, isn't it?
I think you're right that the clock is ticking, and when we get to the meaningful vote in October in Parliament, it will be a vote on two kinds of models. Michel Barnier has made it clear it's either a Canada model or an EEA model, and we have to make a decision on that basis. And I think we do need to have that clarity within the Parliamentary Labour Party and across the entire Labour movement. And I believe very strongly that that European Economic Area associate status is by far the best Brexit option for our country.
But do you think there'll ever be unity within the Labour Parliamentary Party on that, or will you, when it comes to that vote in the autumn, will you have to split, as you see fit?
Well, anyone who's been watching politics over the last few years knows that making predictions is a mug's game. I won't make any predictions. I'm sure you'll forgive me for that. But what I would say is that there is a clear opportunity for building a strong consensus. There is a strong majority in Parliament for that. Don't forget there's lots of Conservative MPs who agree with what I'm saying. We've got a huge opportunity now to build that parliamentary consensus. And get Theresa May to wake up and smell the coffee. This is her approach. Her red lines are not working. Let's have a more sensible approach, a more pragmatic approach, and let's actually build a Brexit that works for Britain.
You mentioned earlier that the wider Labour movement. Just looking at the Sunday papers this morning, they're reporting that the Momentum, that grassroots Labour organisation, that some of the MPs closely associated with them saying that maybe they'd be looking to get rid of up to 50 Labour moderate MPs, that they could be ousted. I guess you'd count yourself as a moderate MP. Are you worried that what we're going to see over the next year is people like the Momentum coming after MPs like you?
I read that Sunday Times story. I have to say there was a very shaky quote in there, not attributed, and the whole thing seemed to be hung on one non-attributable quote. So I don't know how much truth there is in this. What I do know is we're facing the most incompetent, inept Conservative government in living memory, and we should be a lot further ahead in the polls than we are. So the last thing we need is internal party politicking. What we want is to unite, turn our fire on the Tories, and actually get ourselves well ahead in the opinion polls, which is where we really should be by rights.
Why aren't you further ahead in the opinion polls? I mean, as you're saying, everything you've outlined in terms of the weaknesses of the UK government, as you see it, you should be miles ahead, and yet you're barely neck and neck, I guess.
That's a very good question. I think that our need to clarify our position on Brexit is potentially one area. I mean, Brexit's become the most important issue in the mind of the British public, and so we need to be setting out a clear... So we could be really ahead of the curve setting the agenda on that, and I think that's something we need to be doing very quickly. I also think that potentially some of this perception that there's a party within a party and the momentum, what is the role of momentum, what's going on in the Labour Party, is perhaps causing some concern in some areas of the electorate. I can't answer your question specifically, but what I can say is we need to build a clear and strong and coherent message. Let's turn our fire outwards, let's not turn our fire inwards. That would be the worst thing that we could do at this time.
Yeah, thank you very much for your time this morning, Stephen.
Thank you very much.